Wide receiver time. Welcome to Fantasy Smack Talk. Name code Dustin. This video we're going to talk about tiers 1 through 6 of your wide receivers. Be sure to stay tuned for all of other tiers and rankings. And check out our top 150 cheat sheet on the homepage. And don't forget about our games. Twitter, @Fantasy Advice. Subscribe to us on YouTube.
A lot of stuff, but let's get into it. Clearly, you all know who number one is. It's the leader of Decepticons, Megatron. We love this guy, Calvin Johnson. Just a beast last year. 16 touchdowns, 1,681 yards, and supposedly he's bigger, stronger, faster this year. I don't even know how that's possible. This guy's just sick. Clear cut, number one. Nobody else in this tier.
And it's really hard to pick the number 2 guy. There's a lot of guys that could fit the number 2 spot, but we still think it's Larry Fitz. I mean, it was amazing what he did last year with how bad the quarterback situation was for the Cardinals. He still had 1,400 yards, 8 touchdowns. We still love him. He's still young enough to have that type of season again. Next, Wes Welker. I've never necessarily been a believer ever since he hurt his knee, but I mean, how can you ignore what he's done? He's 100% healthy. He didn't miss a game last year. 122 catches. Brandon Lloyd's there now. Doesn't really scare us that much. Wes Welker is still amazing. And at number 4, we got Roddy White. Another solid year for him. Tony Gonzalez is getting older. Yes, they do have Julio Jones out there, but they're going to throw enough where all of those guys are going to still have decent value. We see no reason why Roddy White can't do it again. Next, moving on, Victor Cruz. Where did this guy come from? Unbelievable season. The Giants throw the ball so much as well. Victor Cruz is going to be a very big part of that offense. We see no reason why he can't have another big year. We're not quite sure if he'll match his numbers from last year, but he should easily be well over 1,000 yards.
Gotta love his yak.
You gotta love his yak. And the last guy in this tier was the rookie from last year on my Bengals, AJ Green. This guy's just one of those freakish receivers you can just throw the ball up to. He can go get it. They're going to be looking at him a lot this year. He should be a huge part of that offense as he and Andy Dalton get better and more on the same page. He should have another great year as well.
Tier 3 starts off with Greg Jennings. This guy in 13 games had almost 1,000 yards, had 9 touchdowns. And with Aaron Rodgers throwing the ball, you gotta love that. He is the number 1 target for Rodgers out in Green Bay. At number 8, we got Andre Johnson. If you drafted him last year, he was such a headache. He was gonna come back game time, out, in, out. Regardless, this guy is a prime talent. He's slipping down draft boards, but with good reason. People are a little cautious because of the injuries, but we really love this guy and the value you can get with him now. Next on the list, we got number 9, Hakeem Nicks. It looks like he's going to be ready to go for the season opener. And like we talked about Victor Cruz, the G-men just throw the ball so much, and he's a very talented receiver. Rounding out this tier is Brandon Marshall. He's reuniting with Cutler, and last year on a pretty much terrible Miami team, he had over 1,200 yards, 6 touchdowns. We expect his targets to go way up, and therefore his production as well.
Tier 4 has a ton of talent, and it starts out with number 11, Mike Wallace. He's still the number 1 out there for Pittsburgh. They throw the ball a lot these days. He should have another big year. At number 12, we have Jordy Nelson. If we believed he was going to do what he did last year, he'd be up in Tier 1. We don't think he's going to have a repeat campaign, but he's going to have another solid year if he can stay healthy. He's still in that high-powered Packers offense, and he proved that he can do it last year. Just don't expect 15 touchdowns, but he does still have an upside. Next, we have Julio Jones. Atlanta has said a lot that they are going to pass more, and why wouldn't they if they have Roddy White and Julio Jones? There should be enough passing yards to go around for both those guys to have a lot of fantasy value. Look for Julio to improve on his rookie numbers. Next, Dez Bryant. This guy is just a freak of nature, but he's been inconsistent. They still got Miles Austin out there. They still got Jason Witten, and he has been banged up throughout his career as well. Obviously, the upside's still there. That's why we have him ranked with all these other big-name guys. He could have but he is somewhat of a risk-reward type guy, but he could have a big year. Moving on, Steve Smith out there with Carolina. Him and Cam Newton looked amazing during the first half of the year. They definitely trailed off the second half, but he still put together an amazing year. If he can stay healthy, expect him and Cam Newton to hook up a lot again this year. And the last guy in this tier, Miles Austin. The story for him last year was injuries, but the Cowboys throw the ball a ton with Dez Bryant and Witten. There should be pretty easy to spread the ball around, get the defense to respect the other guys. Miles Austin should have a decent amount of single coverage.
Tier 5 starts off with one of our favorite big-time bounce-back candidates, and he really didn't have that terrible of a year last year, but that's Jeremy Maclin. You know, he had that mysterious injury at the start of the year. He lost all that weight. He's 15 pounds heavier this year, supposedly looking great right now. We really like him to have a very, very solid year. Next on the list, number 18, we got Dwayne Bowe. You know, Kansas City had its ups and downs with Castle, but Bowe has been a constant out there. He's been very solid, should be very good, especially, and he'll be even better in PPR leagues. Next on the list, we got Marcus Colston. You know, he's kind of a guy that's going to drive you crazy. He's up and down, but he always seems to end with over 1,000 yards and a nice handful of 8, 9, 10 kind of touchdown type of performance out of him. And then at number 20, last in this tier, is Stevie Johnson. You know, Fitzpatrick started off so hot last year, then he really cooled off. But Johnson is the clear-cut number one guy out there. He's always a deep threat, can always have those big games.
Let's take a look at Tier 6. We start with Antonio Brown for the Steelers. Solid year for him last year. The thing we don't necessarily like about him, though, is his touchdowns. He can't find the end zone. He didn't find the end zone that much. Only 2 touchdowns last year. He is kind of a deep threat guy. That number should go up this year. But with Mike Wallace out there, we got to rank Antonio Brown down this low. At 22, Vincent Jackson, hit or miss last year for him. And with his new home with Tampa Bay, we're not so sure if it's really going to work out for him. We expect probably a decline in numbers this year, but 1,000 yards, handful touchdowns is definitely not out of the question. Moving on, we got Percy Harvin. He played all 16 games last year, surprisingly, since he was probably questionable in 10 of those games. But, you know, he's a big part of that offense. They're going to find ways to get the ball in his hands, you know, especially with, you know, AP banged up. He might even play a little bit of running back. Who knows? But Percy Harvin, decent pickup in the middle rounds. Moving on to Sean Jackson, big play guy. Only 58 catches last year, but almost had 1,000 yards. You know, hopefully he's done with his little temper tantrum and he can get back to playing football. But we're not really, you know, huge fans of Deshaun Jackson just because he's kind of one of those hit or miss guys. And the last guy in this tier at 25, Kenny Britt. Obviously, huge upside with him. We're not necessarily sure how he's going to come back from his injury, but as long as he's 100%, he definitely has a big upside.
So there you have it. That's tiers 1 through 6. You might have noticed a couple Denver receivers weren't on this list. So check out the next video. They're going to be in there. Feel free to hate in the comments below if you really want to. So again, name code Dustin. Follow us on Twitter at Fantasy Advice. All the crazy stuff going on the homepage, fantasysmacktalk.com. We out. That's right.